everyone who did not hear me the first time. So welcome to the webinar, COVID-19, the Resiliency of Illicit Gold Markets, Perspectives from Migori, Kenya. I'm Marcina Hunter, and I'm a senior analyst at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. I'd like to start off by thanking the OECD for having us as part of this year's conference. I'd also like to thank the panelists who are joining us today from Kenya, who I will be introducing in just a moment. Let me just start my PowerPoint here so that I can give you some visuals. So, for those of us who aren't familiar with the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, we're a Swiss-based NGO focused on promoting greater research, debate, and innovative responses to organized crime. A large part of our work is research-focused, but we also host a network of over 500 experts are increasingly supporting responses. What is important and different about the Global Initiative is that we are development-focused and believe engaging with development actors and supporting development responses is key to effective responses to illicit activity. This is especially important in relation to gold, where there are significant overlaps between informal, formal, and illicit activity, and criminal networks can exploit vulnerable mining communities that are in need of assistance. This session will give a preview of a forthcoming report on illicit gold markets in East and Southern Africa. And today we will also be taking a deep dive and hear from people from Migori, Kenya, one of the places where research took place, on how COVID-19 has impacted the gold sector there and challenges to mining and trading in formal supply chains. So first, the report. Research was funded by the UK, DFID, and research took place in South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, and Zimbabwe. Interviews were also conducted in South Africa, but pricing data was not collected there. The primary lines of research were the gold prices, where the prices gold was being bought and sold at along the supply chains themselves, looking at the movement of gold, where and how it was being moved, and also market structures. This focused on the actors involved and how they seek to control and profit from gold supply chains. Research found that a number of factors shape illicit gold markets, and these can be roughly understood as push and pull factors. Push factors are existing drivers which shape markets. This is where gold is located, so gold occurrences, and regulations in place. Pull factors are methods which criminal or corrupt actors may use to capture illicit gold markets. So this is corruption and criminality. Sitting in the middle are drivers which are a little bit of both, and these are the supply chains themselves and prices offered for gold. In addition to the forthcoming report, these concepts are also explored more deeply in the report Pulling at Golden Threads, which is available on the Global Initiative website. So looking at pricing data, this graph is the aggregate of pricing data across all the countries for 2020. Pricing data was collected from January to December 2020. And to standardize data as much as possible, efforts were made to collect pricing data from the same individuals throughout the course of the year. Although it should be noted that as locations were added on and we made more connections, more points were added, and also pricing data only started to be collected in Zimbabwe in May. Also, pricing were standardized to the greatest extent possible, adjusting for purity and exchange rates. As you can see from the graph, COVID-19 delivered a major shock to the markets in the first quarter of 2020. However, in the second quarter, markets have begun to recover. And by July, illicit markets had largely recovered, and in some places, gold was being bought above the international spot price. However, as we can see, very low prices are still being paid at some mine sites. It's also important to note that this is different than what has been reported at legal mine sites and in legal supply chains. And this shows the resiliency of illicit markets and how smugglers are able to adapt to supply chain disruptions. In this case, it's COVID-19, but this also applies to regulatory and development interventions and highlights how difficult it is to have effective impacts on existing supply chains and markets. The report also looks at supply chains and market actors in the region. This is a map that was developed looking at gold supply chains in Eastern Africa. While the report does focus on illicit gold markets, it's important to recognize how the gold sector is an important livelihood to many remote and economically vulnerable communities across not only East and Southern Africa, but the continent as a whole. As such, responses must navigate the tension between combating criminality while minimizing harm to local communities. This should also mean maximizing development impacts in communities and ensuring that they get the greatest amount of benefit or profits from the gold mine where possible. This requires supporting development responses which directly engage with local communities. This means not only engaging with miners, but also local gold buyers. This is a group that we often see left out of interventions and programming, and their voice isn't heard. In this spirit, today we are going to hear from individuals involved in or engaged with the gold sector in Migori, Kenya. Today we have Manuel Odeni, a journalist with the Radio Africa Group, who is based in Migori. He helped conduct research for the report and will start us off with a presentation on the context of the gold sector in Migori before we have a panel discussion with our other panelists. Today, we also have David Maganya, who is the director of the I Hope Foundation, which works with artisanal miners in Migori. We also have Mr. Jared Nakia, a gold miner and buyer in Migori, and Mr. Omar Faisal, a gold trader in Migori. Although not officially a panelist, we also have Ken Opala with us, who is a co-author of the report and helped conduct research in Kenya. So we may be calling on him as well. So thank you all for joining us, and I will hand it off to Manuel now.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can listen to me. My name is Manuel Odeni, and I'm happy to take part in this research. And I'm also happy to be here. I took part in the wider view of the the research Masena has just talked about, and I'll just focus on Migori. The picture which is on the screen is a woman in Migori County who is prospecting for gold. So in the period of COVID-19, I've been working in Migori as a journalist, and my perspective on how COVID-19 and gold trade was affected, I covered it in some of my articles and also in the research. Claudia, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, I needed the next slide. Thank you. That's my name. There's the next slide. Okay. Now, Migori County is in the western part of Kenya, and it's bordering Tanzania. That's the map of the county. The red back, the other one. So in Migori County, we have over 30,000 gold miners. Yeah, Migori forms part of the gold belt running all the way from Kenya and southern and northern Tanzania. And we have a lot of artisanal miners in the county. Next slide. Next slide, please. Hello, Claudio, can I have the next slide? Thank you. In Migori County, we have over 30,000 active gold miners, and most of them are from nearby Tanzania. The gold miners work on government land, they work on private land, and then we have company lands. We have companies which lease land from the people and work on the gold miner. In Migori, we have how the gold flow is. You start from the gold miners, people who are the first end of the production. Then the people go to the pits, they bring out the gold. Then afterwards, they sell the gold to the gold buyers. The buyers are the people who come directly to the mines to buy the gold. So when they come to the mine after buying the gold, they take it to the gold dealers, mostly in major towns. I think it's the gold dealers who add value, remove impurities in the gold, and then they sell it back to the gold traders. It is the gold traders who find a way of exporting the minerals outside the country, either through legal way or illegal way. But they are the last point of the gold from the country and the region. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. Now, in Migori County, we had cases of COVID-19, and the first case of COVID-19 was reported in the country in March 12, 2020. So among the measures which the government issued, I think it was done globally, was to maintain social distance. We had people who had to wash their hands regularly. People had to wear face masks. And then even those who are in clinic, you should just have one relative in the clinic. So we find that those measures which were done across the country, they did not only affect the whole country, but they also affected the gold mining sector. Next slide, please. Next slide. So in the gold in the gold sector, when the rules were enforced, we found that a lot of markets were closed, schools were closed, some government departments were also closed, sporting activities were closed, and in Migori, local miners were forced to close down. As you can see from the photo, that's a hand washing point, and that's a gold mining town called Osiri Matanda. You can see that the streets are deserted. So we find that 90% of workers in the gold mine were forced to go home. And in Migori County, 30% of those are from Tanzania. So apart from that, the 30% were told to go back home. So we find that on the onset of the pandemic, most gold miners were left, and the workforce at the gold mines were depleted. So the effect of that, next slide, we found that the first effect we had as a region is that the gold production went down. Next slide. We found that the gold production went down greatly. And in most cases, Kenyans who are working in Migori were forced to expel their Tanzanian counterparts. So when Tanzanians went away with their 30% of the workforce, the gold production went down completely. And apart from that, international travel was also curtailed. So there was no way gold could be exported. That's the story I did about that and the measures the local miners were trying to put. The few miners who remained were forced to wear a face mask and the rest. So the effects of all this, that the workforce was down, and then gold production fell by 50%. Because we find that in the trenches and the ditches, if you had 100 workers going in, because of the issue of social distance, only 10 or 15 could go. And the workers had to wear a mask, and they had to work in shift, because the government was really cracking down on overcrowding and such. So the first thing happened is that workforce went down, production went down, and then the prices went down. The next slide. But when the prices were going down locally, internationally, we found that the prices was going up. Next slide, please. We found that internationally the price of gold was going up because you had issues of the collapse of economy. Money was hard to come by. Most of the properties were declining in value. So we found that most people found it better to invest in gold. So the demand of gold went so high around that COVID period. And when the demand of gold started to rise, now there was tension in Migori because the price was good and the government was trying to crack down on mining, both legal and illegal. So while the prices of gold internationally was high, in Migori the price started to increase. And the effect of that is that most miners struggle to come back to the mine. Next slide. So as they come back to the mine, they were forced with a lot of issues of maintaining COVID-19 protocols, while at the same time they have to supply the gold. And when the government was trying to control the gold, the next slide, please. while government was trying to control movement to curtail COVID-19, we find that the same thing was happening. There was demand for gold. So we find that most gold miners were attracted to that high price. So that in Migori, but even the region, we experienced a gold rush. Most miners were now coming to the mine. I did 2 stories about that. There was a gold miners buoyed by steady prices, and they tried to ignore the COVID rule. And then there was a side when mining was at a crossroad with gold prices soaring. So we find that most public mining, even though they were closed, miners were going in illegally. And since mining was the gold trade was also being curtailed, we found that most traders found it easier to use other routes to try to export the gold because the price was high and the international travel was so hard. So we find that during that period also, a lot of gold was leaving the country illegally because you find that a trader, a buyer, or a businessman had a lot of gold and it had to be taken outside the country. And since there was a lot of closure of the border and a lot of control, so most of them opted to use illegal means, especially through Entebbe, Uganda, and through northern Tanzania. So we find that most people are avoiding using Nairobi and using the other routes so that they can maintain the highest demand of gold internationally. The next slide. Good, thank you, Claudia. So so that's lastly, that's the idea we were trying to cover in Migori County, what we tried to cover during the period for my article where I work as a journalist, and the data we tried to collect for the report my colleague Masena said. I think that's the last thing I wanted to say, and that's what we covered during that period and what we covered during. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Very interesting and beneficial to see what's been happening in Migori over the course of 2020. So I think I'd like to open it up now to our full panel, which is Manuel, Jared, David, and Omar. And so I think I'd just like to start off about asking how COVID-19 has impacted on the gold sector in Migori and what you've seen. And maybe let's start with David. David, do you want to tell us what you've observed? And just as a reminder, David is the director of the I Hope Foundation. We seem to be having some issues, so maybe we'll start with Omar.
Okay, how are you?
Thank you so much.
Never mind, we have David now. David, please go ahead.
Yeah, David.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. My name is David Maganya, the director an NGO that is working with artisanal and small-scale miners. I want to bring in the discussion the challenges that artisanal and small-scale miners are faced during COVID-19. And I want to begin that this created a reduction in production of mining activities because the disruption was occasioned by the containment guidelines by government of Kenya. And this resulted to most diggers, those who go underground to dig, not to be able to be doing their activities as usual. So with this disruption, what we want to say is that the disruption led into production decrease. And this resulted also into lack of markets for the commodity because the country was locked down. And internationally, this brought about the issue of now the demand that led to soaring of gold prices in the international markets. But I want to say that COVID-19 also brought a lot of issues to the gold mining sector because it also resulted to increase in child labor because schools were also closed, and we saw an increase of children working in those mines, exposing them to further dangers. So overall, COVID-19 disrupted the supply chain. That would be my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Omar, can you share with us your thoughts on how COVID-19 has impacted the gold sector over the course of 2020?
Number one, the gold sector has been affected in price fluctuations. I'm talking on the trade as a trader. The prices have been fluctuating, and that has affected us a lot. Number two is we've been having a problem with the market access. So the market access is when initially COVID hit, there was a huge problem. There was no way we could have transported the gold because of the closure of the borders, and also all the airplanes all the planes have been stopped. So we had to use different means of transporting our gold to different areas. One of them being there was an open market in Tanzania, in Mwanza and Dar es Salaam. They've opened markets there, and they're better markets, I think, than I think in the whole of East Africa. These are the, President Magufuli had opened the market in Tanzania, which was very good. So that was number one. Number two, Ethiopia opened also the borders. It was buying the gold, which was very good. So the market access, that's where we got the market. Number three is transport. It was very risky carrying the gold because the government involvement is very minimal. It's very less, so it's even not there. So carrying the gold was a big problem. And gold, yes, gold was got in huge amounts, but the problem was we didn't have the market. And those are the major problems we faced: price fluctuations, number two, access of the market, and number three, which was a huge problem, which was transport. We had barriers all over the country. We could not transport the gold, and money movement was very minimal. So thank you. That's my contribution towards as a trader. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Omar. That's really insightful. Jared, could you please give us your perspective as a miner and a buyer?
Okay, thank you, Claudia. I hope that I'm a miner and at the same time I'm a buyer. I remember COVID came and it is still in existence, and we are now talking about the challenges. I'm very happy as per what Odeng has mentioned, Omar and David, but they are in the summary point of it, which is so good because we have poor market for the gold products, low quantity of production of gold being produced, inadequate market for the product. I want to go straight because I'm so down. I'm really, really down, and I'm the first person taking it from the local artisan. Remember when this thing came, and before the COVID, everybody here was very, very rich and acquainted with the best life so far. First of all, when there is poor market, the food production is low because our people down here only depend on the gold as the best thing for them to manage their daily life, which means poor market brought about heavy starvation on the local artisans because they could not get their daily bread. This one is also attributed to the systems being used. Remember when COVID came, as Omar, my friend, has just mentioned, there was inadequate market. Why? Most of them were foreigners who were given license to come here. But when the first COVID case was announced in Kenya, they were to go back to their countries. And remember, this left a very big gap. It sounded like there is a big war in Kenya, and especially in Migori, where gold is being done. They had to go. So the production was very, very high. You could realize that I go to the point and I find a very big amount and quantity of gold. Remember, they expect me to give them the normal amount we are giving per point per gram. But where could I get the money? Because people who are supposed to take it in the category of people like Omar, were nowhere to be seen. A majority left the country. We could not go. Instead, I could take the gold. I don't even know where to take it. Academically, it brought a lot of challenges because I've just realized that most of the kids are now going to the mines. They are going there. They've left the so-called education because the government closed the schools because of the COVID. Now, the only area they could embark to was to go to the mines, of which after getting the gold, the market was also not there. So it brought a lot of problems. There was no way they could sell the product and get food. Starvation was there. It has brought a lot of even diseases due to starvation and malnutrition because the kids are in need of food they cannot get, but the gold product is there. Remember, when the exportation of gold is being done, it is done through a very good market. But the last point of gold production is being done when the product is being made and turned into gold ornaments. The market for that could not be seen because the production of the gold could not go. The gold could be produced, but it could not go to where the production of such ornaments could be. Remember, our men and women are running up and down. The athletes are going to heavy countries, right? Some are even coming from Kenya, as you know. But if the gold being produced from Migori is not there, those ornaments won't be made well because our people will not, the gold will not be taken to those nations, which means smuggling would be done, which could not be enough. The purification could not be done well because of the illegalities, the porous borders, and only a very far place where you can take gold. So in summary, it has brought a lot of challenges, which I can summarize that there is a lot of malnutrition because our mothers could not get food for their daily life. It has brought a lot of challenge in education. And remember, even people cannot even hide their pride because social places, you cannot get money to join friends. You cannot build any business enterprise you wanted to build because there is no market. Otherwise, thank you, Claudia. To that extent, I think I've contributed something which is within our table and up to now. Remember, the challenges are still on. We don't say that they were. They are still on. Otherwise, thank you.
Jared. Thank you. That's a really good insight and really gives, I think, an important perspective on what's happening at the mine sites and how people have been affected on the ground by COVID-19. And I think both Omar and Jared touched on this when they were talking about the impacts, but I think I want to explore it a bit further, is why the illicit sector is attractive to miners or traders, or why they might feel forced to engage with the illicit sector because it's too hard to get the right licenses or find the formal supply chains or sell gold within Kenya, which is, I think, a lot of what we heard is that it's not necessarily a choice, but people are pressured to make these decisions. So I guess, Manuel, you also did a lot of research on this. So could you maybe start off and comment on why the illicit sector might be attractive to people and what the obstacles are to legally mining and trading gold?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I got your points. The main problem we have in Kenya is corruption.
Yeah.
That's what is hurting the gold business. That's corruption has been affecting us so much. To get a license is hard. There's a lot of bottleneck, a lot of bureaucracy, and it's designed to frustrate people. People who have managed to get the license still get frustrated because they have to pay bribes along the way. To transport gold from Migori to the export market, there's corruption. And the issues of corruption comes in, we have people you can call cartels, people who can easily swindle money out of you. We have cases where you can take your gold to Nairobi, you think you're having a buyer, then the buyer is also fake. So they work with, collude with the government. That's the main issue, corruption. Then the last issue that we don't have a gold refinery point in Kenya. We find that most traders are very willing to take their gold outside the country to go do their refinery. During the research when I took part, we had people used to take their gold to refinery all the way to Italy. We had other traders who would rather take it to Dubai. The closest they could get a refinery was in South Africa or DRC Congo. But South Africa is far from Kenya. Then the closest they could get in DRC Congo was also riddled with corruption. So you find most of the gold which is leaving the country is also done illegally. Then the next issue, it is easier to transport your gold illegally because most of the gold miner, artisanal gold miners are not registered. They don't have a license. So they cannot pay their taxes to the government. So most of them come with their gold directly and they want to be paid cash. Because they cannot pay KRA taxes, most of them are not being captured in the tax bracket. So it is easier for a gold miner to get his gold, like Nyakia to get his gold, sell it to a trader, the trader then moves it out of the country. And then it is easier to swindle gold outside the country because a gold the size of this bottle of water fetches million. And if you are in a car, it is easier to take it and put it even, let's say, in the bonnet or under the seats. So you can easily pass through the checks. You can walk into Uganda like a tourist, but you have the gold. So it is easier. Then apart from that, the taxing is not so elaborate. How the government is taxing the gold is not elaborate. So you find that if you have a license and the government want to tax you, they want to ask the source of your gold. And most artisanal miners are not comfortable to give their names and their details. So they'd rather they get the cash, they give you the gold, then it's done. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you for that really great overview of what we see, the challenges, and why people feel pressured to make those decisions. I think value addition and the lack of domestic refineries is one thing you touched on, how South Africa is the closest place, so you have to go to Dubai or Uganda, and the ease of smuggling gold and those sorts of issues. Omar, as a gold trader, I don't think we often get the opportunity to hear from gold traders in the forums. And so I think your perspective is really valuable. And maybe you could speak about the challenges that other gold traders face in Kenya, about licensing and moving gold. And you referenced this earlier, so maybe you could just go maybe a bit more into detail around the licensing and trade and tax aspects of the gold trade and how that can make it difficult or maybe more attractive to some traders to smuggle their gold out of the country. Could you talk about that?
Okay, based on the licensing and the government, we have a big problem with the government. The government doesn't support the traders in the sense that when you want to get a license, it's very difficult and it will cost you a lot. That license would cost you a lot, but once you get the license, it becomes a little bit easier. Again, there's a tussle on when you want to export your gold. It's at risk. You become very, very fearful of your life, and even what you're carrying, you might even lose it. So preferably, if the government was a little bit flexible, it would have really assisted us. But getting a license in Kenya is very difficult. Number two, regulations based on the taxation and the taxation. The government has set a tax frame for the exporter. But when you take it to the airport, there is a customs charge and there's a KRA charge. You're charged both. As my friend David said, there is a small thing that on the ground where the artisanal miners get it, and then the trader gets it. That's where there are no charges because there's no way to track it. The government hasn't put a system in place. Preferable, that is why he has said we should open a, what is it called? A refinery so that it can be controlled and can also be checked the same way Tanzania has done. It has put a traders control system where each trader is checked and is followed up to and is protected also. His gold is also protected until the end where he sells it to other countries or it's sold locally. So if the international community the international gold buyers can come and invest in the country to be able to buy the gold directly, that would be very good. Other than refinery, because if you say refinery, it comes to the point whereby the gold trader does the refining. He does the purification himself. So you have a pure refined or pure gold based on the percentage that can come to even to 92%, which is as good as a refined gold. So I would say this: what affects us so much is the legalities and the approvals of the licenses and the export of the gold, of the refined gold. So if the traders can come on board and invest in the country, it will be much easier than exporting it to other countries. And we already have Tanzania that is much closer right now, that is doing a good job, and I think Kenya is also following. The government is to build a refinery in Kakamega soon, but because of the challenges the government faces, it doesn't have money, I think. So I think it hasn't built the refinery. It was supposed to build the refinery. I think the next two years it will build the refinery. That's what we've been told. So as a trader, I support the international market to come on board, and the government should also support it, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you for that. Just looking at the clock, Jared, I think I'm going to turn to you to also talk about the challenges of operating legally as a miner. So could you please talk about that? But could you also add on what recommendations you have for the path forward and what you might like to see from the government or development actors or the private sector, and what perhaps they could do to better support the mining community in Migori? I think you're on mute, Jared. You're still on mute. Sorry.
Am I on?
Yes, great, thank you.
Okay. So I think the government is doing something which is a bit intentional, because already we have minister in charge of mining, and once the minister in charge of mining is there, is the first person who should make sure that the mining sector is active within all the legalities. The first recommendation is that it must be given a lot of weight as a source of income to the country. Remember, the taxation, which even my brother Omar is talking about, comes direct to the government kitty. So first recommendation they should do, they should make sure that they give it the best space so far as a source of income to the country, which means they must come up and support both the artisanal miners, the middle market, and the heavy buyers of the gold. Secondly, they should make sure that the license is given within a point of affordability. Remember, once the corruption has been mentioned, the term corruption, meaning the taxation will have to be high. For you to acquire the license, like Mr. Omar has mentioned, it will not be easy. So they must give us a flexible price. They must give us a flexible quotation for the taxation, which means what I'll be getting as the artisanal miner shall be better to sustain me, to sustain what the gold needs, to sustain what the region needs. So they should use the money being set for the ministry to equip the miners. Remember, the miners use their own systems, the risky systems of producing the gold. But we have countries like China, which are very much aware, and they can provide the equipment for mining. So the government must provide equipment, meaning protective device for gold mining. The government must flex the system of taxation. The government must make sure that corruption is done away with. That is what I can say.
Thank you, Jared. David, I'm sorry I missed you in our last round of questions, but could you please also let us know what recommendations you have for the path forward from your perspective as an NGO. Also, if you want to add anything on to the challenges of operating legally that you've seen, do please feel free to add on to that as well.
Thank you. One of my recommendations in regard to artisanal really generate.
Jared should mute.
David, go ahead. Thanks.
Is that there's need for training and awareness targeting local artisanal miners so that they'll be able to keep up with the production, because this is the main source of livelihood. And if it is disrupted because of the COVID-19, then we need to continue the bits of sensitization. We create more awareness. We train them using the local language that they can best understand. Encourage them to adopt the personal protective equipment and also hand wash stations, because the challenge has been with the hand sanitizers. For example, if you use hand sanitizers, gold, using bare hand, you see that is mud. So hand sanitizers do not really come into perspective. So we need to challenge them and train them on alternatives that they can use to keep hygiene at all times. And then 2 is to continue adopting to COVID-19 measures as have been espoused by the WHO and also the government of Kenya. In this sense, thereof, production will continue, and just to also ensure that, as Alvara's point, is that there's need to ensure that access to market is continued throughout. The artisanal miner will be able to benefit because they have daily lives to live. They have children back at home, and they have to put food on table. So we don't really need to dwell so much on COVID-19, thereby disrupting this, but we need to come up with measures that will ensure that access to market is guaranteed throughout. In terms of legality of gold mining, and maybe talking about smuggling and talking about not wanting to follow the right way, I would encourage and recommend that the government really need to streamline and implement the existing policies surrounding artisanal gold mining. In this sense, therefore, we will have a mining community that is assured that in terms of what they produce, the cost that they invest in getting the gold, they'll be able to get effective return on investment when we have policies that are implemented and are adhered to. Thank you so much, Marcella.
Thank you, David. Those are really, again, excellent insights. I feel like I sound like a broken record today. So anyway, why don't we, I think, Omar, could you please let us know what your recommendations would be for the path forward? And then I think we'll finish up and have Manuel kind of finish up our panel with his recommendations at the end. So please go ahead.
Okay, my recommendations, good afternoon. My recommendations are, number 1 is the international market should open an open market in Kenya, if it's possible. Number 2, the government should ease on the legalities of the licenses, which would be very okay. And it should trickle down to the counties, meaning we have different counties. So if it is possible, we open an open market for the gold buyers or for the artisanal gold traders that would be okay. So they can also meet in an open place where the government can collect the financing. So this should also trickle down on the financing. International marketers, if they can finance the gold traders like they're doing right now, the UAE, they finance some of the traders to purchase gold in large quantities so that they can get the gold there and purchase it from that end. So rather than us exporting the gold, I would prefer if the international market can come in and do it itself by opening open markets for the gold trade. So those are my recommendations. I insist on the government assistance, whereby it eases on the regulations. Number two, the international market should come closer by bringing its open markets in Kenya, if it's possible. Number three is the artisanal miners should be assisted by the traders by being assisted by the funders, those people who are funding the traders, so that this trade can be swift and easy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Omar. Do you want to go ahead, Manuel?
Thank you. Thank you. I have seen several people have tried to react to what you have been discussing. So in wrapping up, I think I'll capture it. Most of our cries as Migori residents, apart from being a journalist, is that government should control it. So that the benefit we have on the gold should trickle down to the people. When the trade is not regulated, you find that you have flight of taxes, you have flight of corruption, so the money is not channeled back to the society. We find that most schools around the gold mining sector are malnourished. People are not going to school. The hospitals there are not working hard. So as Omar has said, we need at least the sector to be more regularized. We should get a refinery in Kenya, in Kakamega, so that gold can be tracked from the artisanal miner all the way to when it is exported outside the country. That way we'll have it easier. Then I found somebody who was asking, what is the monetary value of gold in Kenya? Or can you quantify the monetary value? It is hard to quantify the monetary value because it is not regulated. It is hard to get the quantity of gold being exported outside the country. It is hard to know the deposits, how much is the deposit worth, or what is the capacity, because getting a license is hard. So those are the things we need as actors and as players and as residents to work on it. As a journalist, I've found a lot of people who wish to get a license. We have some artisanal miners who have come together to form circles so that it can be easier for them to get a license. We have traders who have come together and have their own associations so they can easily get a license. But I find that getting that is very hard. So a lot of illegal connection, illegal people, we have Chinese who are coming in, foreigners from Tanzania, from Congo. So that one should be regulated. I think that's what I wish to put through.
Thank you, Manuel. And thank you to all of our panelists today for really insightful and I think valuable interventions from Migori and giving us the opportunity to hear directly from you about what you're seeing, your experiences, and what kind of responses you'd like to see. I know I really appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone else does too. And I think a lot of your recommendations and what you've seen reflect that first graphic I showed in my PowerPoint on the factors shaping illicit gold markets. Like within regulations, we see challenges around licensing and taxes. With supply chains, there was talk about how easy it is to carry gold across the border, but also how there's a need to bring increased value addition within country, and the talk about local market, open markets or refineries. And then also, of course, we did have corruption. So I think we had a few questions in the chat here. Joyce, can you help me out? Did you look at the questions, or should I go back and see which ones I can pull up here?
The questions are on the chat section.
Okay, I see one. So this is interesting. To what extent did the disruptions caused by COVID-19 bring about a reshuffle of actors in the gold trade in Kenya? I think you spoke a bit about this earlier, about foreign traders being an important part of the trade before COVID and then getting kicked out of the country. So maybe could you talk about that and any other kind of reshuffles you saw with the types of actors involved, or like the power dynamics between different gold miners and buyers that you saw? I'll just open up to the panel.
Okay, I'll wish to tackle that. This is Manuel. We find that gold mining is a nomadic activity, mostly the artisanal miner. It's like a gold rush. When there's a gold somewhere in a region, they move in there. When there's another gold in a site, they move in there. So mostly locally among the artisanal miner, there was not a lot of disruption. We find that most of them were Kenyans. But for the Tanzanians who are from across the border, most of them went away. We had some Chinese interest. Most of the Chinese went back. But generally, everything was just normal. The traders came back. And I've seen that Olivia, I think that's the name, Olivia also asked if the disruption of gold mine affected other businesses, like if traders now went over to cattle rustling or smuggling drugs or bang. We did not report that one so widely, because in Kenya, most of mercury which is used in gold comes from Tanzania. Even before COVID, we had cases of the same channel of smuggling where mercury is coming in or gold. We have cases of bang, ivory. It has just been ongoing. There's nothing remarkable so much that came out of that. I think I've tackled that part.
Thank you. David, Jared, or Omar, do any of you have any thing you'd like to add to that about the reshuffle of actors in Migori? Okay. I think, let me just check if our colleague Ken was on the call, but I think he's having some internet issues, so may have dropped off. So we'll have to come back to him. There was a question about the government and what the government is doing around gold actors and corruption, and what local mining associations are doing to promote ethics among artisanal miners. So maybe, Jared, you might be well placed to respond to this. Sorry to put you on the spot here. But what kind of interventions do you see with the Kenyan government? And are there any local mining associations in Migori? And what are they doing right now around the gold sector?
Okay, thank you. First of all, you've mentioned corruption. And remember, corruption is the worst thing so far in the world. The local miners, at times, they are a bit adamant, unless they are given some kind of civic education, as was mentioned. Because what they get, at times, they just get and pocket. So the interventions by the government to curb up every bit of it, I just feel that as of now, I cannot applaud the government for having done as anything good, because they only come when a case of death has occurred. When someone has been held within the mines, that's when the government comes. They give promises, they talk all they can, but later on they don't. We expect the government even to come up with interventions of maybe supplying the minor necessities of which they don't. We even expect the government to give us stern measures and warnings pertaining to the unfair systems of operations in our mining sectors, which they don't. So the interventions the government do, I can say, which is a bit negative, only to come harass the local artisans and then they get applauded by giving some token for them to leave our people. But remember, when you are arresting even someone who was doing mining locally without you as the government giving him or her any equipment which shall even substantiate you are coming to arrest, for sure it's not good. So personally, as of now, they don't even offer any food to the locals as a result of the COVID-19. They don't even come and offer the sanitizers. Our people are suffering. So I don't have anything I can say that the government is trying. Remember, even the local artisans have tried so much to have circles which can support their sector. But the government, through corruption, they come and scuttle everything. So that one, I don't have any adequate answer to give on the interventions from the government. They intervene negatively. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared, for leaving on that high note, which is very positive. David,
I'm touched.
really shining path for the future there. David, I see that you've unmuted yourself. Do you have something you'd like to add?
I just want to also add my voice as a partner that is supporting artisanal gold miners, because the health of the artisanal gold miners is very key. Because if they are not healthy, then we cannot talk about production, and we'll not even be talking about the gold market. So I would just also want to add my voice that the government is not doing anything at all to protect or rather cushion the gold mine, that we also prioritize health programs targeting artisanal gold miners. Nobody wants to talk about the effect of mercury on the health of artisanal gold miners. Each and every year, we lose several artisanal gold miners as a result of handling mercury with the bare hand, because mercury is toxic and has got several dangerous disadvantages to the artisanal gold miners. So on the issue of government influence or action on the artisanal gold miners, I would want to say that the government is really doing very little. And I want to give my thumbs up to the associations. We have circles and we also have associations at the gold mine who are at least trying to support these artisanal gold miners in terms of access to personal protective equipment, placement of
Sorry, David, I think we're losing you a bit. And I'm also looking at the time here. So I think
patients. So that is basically my contribution. We really need to support artisanal gold miners to keep healthy. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And for highlighting the fact that responses to illicit markets don't just need to target, but really need to include a development aspect where we're supporting the miners and I think local buyers themselves. So looking at the time, we're going to wrap up, but thank you all for joining us today. If you've enjoyed our conversation, which I hope you have, we're going to have our report on illicit gold markets in East and Southern Africa probably coming out about mid-May. So look out for that. And we'll be having launches around the publication of the report, which you are welcome to join and engage in. And for updates on the report and the Global Initiative, please feel free to follow the Global Initiative on Twitter or myself. And our Twitter handles are there on the slide. So thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you, Claudio.
Thank you.
Thank you.